Okay, thank you for joining us, especially after lunch as well. I do hope that our conversation is lively enough that we managed to keep you in the room and awake. So in this session, we're going to be taking a look at how industry and government work together, exploring what provides most value, whether that be arriving at the destination, and that's in achieving the goals that we set out, or the journey along the way, and that's how we work together with industry and with government along the way. So I do think it will be quite a lively discussion from the conversation we had in planning, and we'll hopefully set out some further opportunities for us to work together to enhance the digital economy on the island. We will be taking questions on Slido and from the audience, so if you want to submit a question, you can either use the QR code or you can go to slido.com and use the hashtag DI22. So I'd like to introduce my panellists for this session today. We are joined by Katie Nicholson, who is Director of Startup Grind, but also sits on the Digital Isle of Man board. Simon Noble, who is a Director of King Gaming and Champion Tech here on the island. Rebecca George, CEO of the Chamber of Commerce, and Ranald Caldwell, who is the Visit Isle of Man Chair. So I think let's start off with a few words from each of our panellists and to explain how we work together, how they work with government and how they work with digital. We'll start with Katie, we'll go down the line.
Thanks, Abby, put me on the spot. So in terms of my role, I would say being part of the board, I've been on the board now for 4 years, so since the agencies started out, so I've kind of been through the process of the first board cohort into the newest board, and it's been great. It's been a learning experience for me. It's been really interesting to see actually from the inside. I think a lot of the time, perception-wise, when you're perhaps in industry on the island, and I've been working in the digital industry since 2010, it's very easy to make assumptions, to get kind of bogged down in myths, shall we say, and I think sometimes when you actually see it from the other side, it's really interesting to see a lot of the work that goes in behind the scenes, and really I think the important thing is how much the agencies, government, Digital Isle of Man actually work with organisations and industry as a whole. I think that's really key from my point of view.
Thank you. My name is Sam Noble from King Gaming. We are a large Asian-facing sports betting operator, gambling in casinos, primarily focused on the Asian market, but we also develop products here from the Isle of Man with the aim of becoming a leading B2B supplier in the gaming industry in the next 5 years. We've worked very closely together with Digital Isle of Man and Department of Enterprise as we've established a strong foothold here on the island, not only in terms of our immediate needs with addressing our sort of skills gap and sort of skill shortage in recruiting on the island, but also, further, thanks to the introductions to Digital Isle of Man to people like Paul Maddox, who've really assisted us greatly with our development of our King Gaming campus at the Victoria Road site. So that's a £45 million development that we've been sort of in lockstep with the government on, and being incredibly supportive. So in addition to, perhaps what you typically expect with an e-gaming operator in licensing and visas and all these kind of things to sort of help us establish a base on the island, they've also been absolutely fantastic with planning and letter support and introducing us to the right people and getting the right people in the room to hopefully address any issues that we may have.
So obviously, Chamber is our key role is to be the conduit between industry and government. That's where I see our biggest strength. Our role is to give industry a voice into government. So, of course, our relationship with government is strong. We need it to be strong so that we can challenge and lobby, but also have a good relationship with all of the different agencies. Our work spans across DFE, majority of our relationship is with DFE, and across the agencies. It's very important for us that we stay well connected with the work that the agencies do, so that we can filter that through to the industry, to our members, and vice versa as well. And I'm not just saying this because today is the Digital Agencies Conference, but I've been around since the agencies were formed 5 years ago, however long they were, and digital, I'm so impressed with the way Digital Agency has really pushed forward its agenda and achieved so much. And we were having this conversation in our planning discussion about how's that happened? Is it because it's digital, or is there another reason? Why, what is it that's worked that, and I'd like to see that across all of the agencies.
I'll slip you your check after.
Sorry. I'm sorry. Yours is lovely too.
That's not that. I've been fortunate to be the chair of the Visit Agency for the last 4 years when it was set up, and the one thing that was very noticeable is we moved in and formed a private-public partnership with sort of 80% coming from the private sector of the membership, and then the public sector making up the other 20, is that our attitudes in terms of performance management and risk were completely different. We just didn't align at all. There was no real measurement within the department of what good looked like. There were no consequences for non-delivery. There was a culture that didn't really accept change and, moving forward with KPIs, etc., you have to explain what a KPI was. So I think the big thing that's happened over the last 3 to 4 years is a realisation that if we're going to be successful, we have to measure and perform like a business. So I think that's what the agency have clearly done. And then in support of my sister here, in terms of digital praise, I think looking from the inside, digital the one will be the vanguard of change, both in terms of culture, because you have to have the right culture in which to facilitate that change, in terms of measurement. And I know Lan, who's largely driven it, has brought a lot of value to the other agencies because we've followed and there's been a path to follow. So we're very grateful to the digital agency and to the change that comes from that area. So that's me.
Thanks, Ronald. So actually just digging into that a little bit deeper on that side. So for those of you that were at the conference this morning, Lyle went on stage and talked through some of our active initiatives and some of our new initiatives that we're bringing through. So the goals against the results for last year have obviously been pretty well received. There's some areas where we've done really well in, and there's others where we've said, do you know what, it hasn't quite worked out exactly the way we thought it would. But for the coming year, if we do achieve all of those goals, it will result in an exchequer benefit of 10.9 million for the Isle of Man, which is, it's a pretty decent amount. What you guys probably don't see is that underneath the overarching objective and those 3 OKRs, we do have quite detailed roadmaps in order for us to drive that initiative forward. So ultimately, this might be essentially a different way of doing things for the government in the Isle of Man. Certainly for digital, it's something that we've brought in the last probably 4 years. Is this how you want government to work? Do you want them? I mean, you mentioned some of that about working as a business, and I think that's probably a theme we probably want to dig into a little bit more. But is that what you expect?
I'll go first. Yeah, absolutely. I think that over the years we've seen a lot of reviews, consultations, new departments set up, agencies set up, and there's some great stuff out there, but we don't always see that transition through to the end. So people get disheartened in where's it all going. And the only way that we can make these things happen is to have a more joined up government. That has to happen. And we saw it in COVID, the way DfE and Treasury particularly worked so closely together. And actually they shot themselves in the foot because we know they can do it now. So, we're sort of challenging and saying, you can do this, you can join up more. But at the moment, the departments all work in silos and they're fighting against each other, and nothing will progress properly until they can work much more like a business, much more as one team.
Yeah, I'd support that. I mean, you asked the question, we're nearly there yet. I think we're getting better at actually understanding where we're going in the first place, by actually articulating not only our strategic direction to the economic strategy. I know Visit got approval this year in May as to what it was trying to achieve, and then putting a roadmap in place, the milestones, the handrails to say, are we on course, and checkpointing, but more importantly, who actually owns the delivery. And that's the one thing I'm saying is delivery has never really come to fruition as well as it could, and it needs to improve, and we need to be held to account for that.
Yeah, I would second that. I think you can't just create a goal or an OKR and it magically happens, because that's what we want it to happen. It's all the things that go behind it to make sure that you've got that alignment across the 8 government departments and the communication, and even in our organisation, we're fortunate it's just a single company, but you set OKRs and you can guarantee there's somebody in one department hasn't got a clue, it hasn't cascaded down to them. And I think the challenge probably for digital is that sort of torchbearer is to make sure that these goals aren't communicated, and hopefully there's sort of bottom-up goal setting as well, coming back from how am I going to make this contribution to achieve that target.
Yeah, absolutely. Everybody plays their part, and it's ensuring that people understand what that part is. Yeah, for sure. Now, Katie, you see it from the other side a little bit as well as a board member. This is something that we report into you on a monthly basis. Is there more that you'd want to see from a board perspective?
There's a lot to read each month. I would say I think it's really good that, for example, this morning Lyle stood up there and held, Digital have held their hands up on certain things and said, we've not hit that target, instead of trying to kind of do a PR, approach of trying to make it all glitzy, like, no, we can't do everything. Digital Isle of Man can't do everything. I see it in those board meetings. We're working across so many sectors. Not everyone on the board can be an expert in everything. Sometimes naturally you're more interested, you've got more experience, and so maybe you understand it better. And it's great we've got such a diverse board, but if you then cascade that down to the team and the people within digital, it cannot be, if you're in an organisation, you have specialists in every department executing on those projects. And I think the expectation sometimes that digital can do it all is different. And I think that that's why working with, as I said before, just working with the private sector more to kind of feed that back and help. Private sector should be saying, this is what we want, this is what we expect, and kind of keeping that conversation going. And I know that does happen obviously through Chamber to a great extent.
So I guess then what is really more important, is it reaching those goals and bringing back that exchequer benefit, or is it our journey of how we work together? Where actually can we get the most value?
You go for it. I think some of the recent initiatives that have been launched, Innovation Challenge, FinTech, all that kind of stuff, and not just working with the private sector but cross agency as well. I think that's really beneficial because it pools the resources, pools the skills. It kind of opens it out there to give something a go and to try and actually see if it happens. And by bringing both private and public sector together on the journey, hopefully that is the best way, rather than trying to fight an uphill battle on your own.
Ranald, you said something really interesting in our planning meeting, which I was hoping you were going to say today. Or maybe it wasn't Ranald.
Give me a hint.
Oh no, maybe it wasn't Ranald. Somebody said, if you're reaching those goals, then maybe they weren't the right numbers.
There's always
made a note of it and everything.
Well, I thought I was being told to keep quiet because sometimes I'm too opinionated. But no, certainly, in the finance background I came from, what gets measured gets managed, and it was just your daily ritual. You were challenged in your numbers, and it wasn't the top line number that we focused on. It was the what lay beneath was more important than anything else. So, for example, if we were looking at the visitor economy and a top line number, I would be more interested in understanding the health and well-being of all of our airline routes. So we've asked the AS for those passenger numbers, and I know that the profitability of an airline is not purely just on the passenger numbers, but we want to know that at risk before they actually withdraw from service. So we want to keep that infrastructure open and building, and have a clear plan of attack to grow and support that economy. Similarly, on the accommodation front, we need to start building that accommodation now to meet the numbers that are ahead, because we're currently capped at 345,000 visitor growth, even if we max out the shoulder seasons, because there's not enough accommodation. So to get to 500,000, we need to build 500 style catering units and 600 more hotel rooms. So it's a far bigger view than just one number. And I think you can get carried away just by managing the one number, and then growth never happens because you're focusing on the wrong thing.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, I think success is probably a journey rather than a destination. And as long as you're putting all of those steps and sort of making that change today, even if it's just the goal to be, a better version of yourself than you were previously. And hopefully you start getting those sort of small wins. People see that it's working, you get that communication going together and sort of collaborating, and hopefully that starts building momentum. Of a different way of working. To be successful, it's one of the analogies that you sort of see is if you're, growing tomatoes in a greenhouse or something and it's not happening. Very rarely do people change the plant; they change everything around it. You start sort of checking the soil and fertiliser and all those kind of things and watering, and it's a bit like that really. And it's the good thing with the sort of progress and the journey, because it's an evolution, is you can start that today. It's not like we look at this and go, oh wow, you need 300 new employees this year on the Isle of Man. We can start today with getting those processes in place and sort of working more efficiently, and hopefully you get that buy-in from people with those sort of quick, easy wins. And so it's very much, I'd say, the process rather than the destination.
So digging into that a little bit deeper. So how can we, and I say as Digital Isle of Man, how can we help you, your businesses, your sectors, your organisations? How can we help you more effectively on that journey above what we're perhaps already doing, or which areas do we need to strengthen to make sure that we're helping on that growth?
I guess from our perspective as an online gaming company, 75% of our staff are on visas and supported through visas with sort of moving to the island. We actually have 100% success rate at hiring Manx citizens when they apply for a job, but there's just not a huge amount out there. And so sort of helping on the skill front, and I know this morning with Lyle, and all of the island jurisdictions, that was sort of number one. And obviously we feel that's true too. I mean, we've been very fortunate that we have digital support, because you are fantastic, in terms of getting people in. I mean, I can see Paul's in the audience, but Paul's pushing us more than we're pushing him to get some of this stuff across the line, which is sort of tremendous. But just simple processes. I think like my colleague Pauline sort of mentioned this morning that a year ago there was a survey, and one of the sort of suggestions was about we talk about digital and everything's digital, it's all data and we're all Internet of Things, but just having an online form for visa applications and confirmation of employment, it's been a year now and it still hasn't happened. And so, little things like this would make a huge difference, to us as a company and as an organisation.
Yeah, I think tying that back into the journey and going back to what Beck said about COVID, it is definitely a journey. There's so many things happening in the external environment all the time, but I think in particular over the past 24, 36 months, we've seen monumental changes, and I think the fact that, like you said, in COVID, DfE and Treasury working together, we all know that you could go online, you could fill out the form to get the salary support. That was all kind of, maybe not at the very start, but very quickly became quite a streamlined process. So why can't things like different kinds of applications, I know some of the stuff that companies register is now online, but it just shows that it is a journey and it has been done in some elements. So I think, there's definitely potential to build on that.
Yeah, we're seeing things slip back to the way it used to be, and we've got to keep reminding government that that actually you can escalate these things super quick, and digital is the best way to do that. Going digital on things like filling out forms, but also making them dead simple to complete. Some of the financial support applications were dead easy. They were easy because they needed to be implemented quickly, so it can be done, but not just on the practical side, but legislatively as well, in terms of keeping those policies flexible, so that if things slip through the cracks, things need amending, it can be done super quick. And we're so lucky on the island that we do have a small, tight-knit business community and a very accessible government who do listen. They really do, and we've seen that at Chamber more than ever over the last couple of years, that if we lobby and challenge them enough and give them the data that they need and the research that they need, they listen, they truly do. And that's the power of industry, to talk to Chamber. I'm still giving Chamber a plug, but the more that we get from industry, the stronger the voice is coming from industry to go into government. I've got off on a tangent. What question was
yeah, back to digital. I think there's also, obviously, because it is digital, we all kind of assume that kind of stuff is within the remit of the digital agency. But a lot of the time, the problem sits behind, I believe, behind GTS, which is kind of, I think they've still got overall responsibility for technology within government. So, for example, I know that when in the previous board we wanted certain functionality on our digital Isle of Man website to be competitive against the likes of Jersey and against the likes of other jurisdictions, even on the data that we could acquire, and we had to remove the website from outside the kind of government framework to be able to do that. So whilst it is digital, I think it's not necessarily within the remit of the agency.
Yeah,
that shows that it's not joined up.
Yeah, it might not be within the remit of the agency, but ultimately that is our role as especially the team that I work with, the strategic partnership team. That is our role. You tell us what is most important to you and what needs to get done, and that's our role, is to make sure that feedback gets through government, it gets to the right people, and so even though it's not potentially on us, it's still our role to, again, be a conduit and make sure it gets to the right place as well.
But I think your role's bigger than you think it is, because I think you'll probably need more support than we do, and we've asked for a number of things that you're beginning to help us on. I mean, a simple example is that we've been asking for quite a while for Manx Telecom to have a welcome to the Isle of Man when you arrive with a different phone. Sure do it rather well. They say welcome to Jersey when you land on the Isle of Man. So simple things they could actually say, what is this island all about? Those are the simple things that would make such a difference, and then can navigate onto something else. So we have to stick to the priorities. I appreciate that, but it's those little things that begin to nickel me a little bit.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's something we should be able to assist with. So what else is, there's something else, and again we talked about this in our planning call quite a lot, and it was pretty much across the board really. I think it was around kind of availability of data and being able to the needing better reporting on things. And Bex, I think this is probably something that's pretty close to your heart, so if you want to pick up on this.
Yeah, well, not a lot to say on it apart from the fact that the Isle of Man government is shocking at collating data, always has been, and more and more and more it comes up in pretty much every conversation and meeting I have across every sector, that data is needed. Retail, hospitality, visit. We just, if we want to know the answer to something, we can't get it. We just can't get it. And it goes back to the whole, this department won't talk to this department, so it's difficult to gain that data. But it's about not having the right technology to leverage that as well. So, for example, in other jurisdictions, they have an app, a simple app for their retailers to update and track their weekly sales, and that goes into a centralised point. So they've got very up-to-date records on economic movement within the retail sector. It's only an app, it's actually not that fancy. We need things like that, and it's industry that can actually do that. We go back to government can't do everything. Industry needs to come up with these ideas and push these forward. Government can be the enabler, and then we can crack on with it and do it.
Yeah, so that leads in nicely to kind of my next question on that. Where can industry lead on this relationship and this journey? Where can industry feed in and support the work that government's doing?
Yeah, just before I hand over, just on that, we've spent many years just complaining about the same old things that cause the Isle of Man issues, all the barriers that are in the way, and there's the same ones that we've been discussing for a long, long time since I've been on the island. What we need to do is come up with the solutions where everybody in this room knows what the barriers are, knows where the issues are across all different sectors. So let's come up with the solutions. Actually, industry are the ones that can do that. Government aren't always the best people, to come up with the solutions. It's industry that need to do that, and more than often than not, when we go to government with a solution, they're like, "Yay, this is brilliant," because we've helped them. We've helped them come up with an answer to a problem.
Yeah.
So coming up with solutions is one of the best ways to move things forward.
Right. Just develop a channel for communication. All the agencies are set up as sort of a voice of that particular agency or sector. So we want to hear your views and opinions through the agency board, through the chamber, and then we will take those up, turn them into policy, turn them into processes, or look at the finance to support. So the danger in the past has been it's very much been top down. We've told everybody what we're doing. Paradigm shift is it's bottom up. Industry should be telling us what they need and how we should do it. We will facilitate that and drive, and then you hold us to account to where we started this whole journey, a set of numbers that will ensure that we're on course.
Yeah, I think a transparent process and a shared vision between sort of industry and government, creating the conditions here. I think in the past, Isle of Man tends to got this great idea that it's going to change the world, whereas, I guess the government isn't necessarily an entrepreneurial organisation, but create that environment to bring the entrepreneurs here, and, with the infrastructure, the systems, and relationships and things on the island, I think that would make a huge difference. I think, I guess just touching on the point earlier about data, it's very difficult to hold people to account without those numbers. And I think, sometimes some of the frustrations that we've had, where we've sort of come into contact with government and perhaps haven't had your assistance to help us through, is that sometimes there can be, seem to be sort of little accountability. If I didn't hit the target or something that we agreed, well, it kind of happens. Someone was sick, someone was off, and we don't seem to have any recourse to that. So, sorry, I'm probably straying away from your question here, but I'd say just sort of sharing that vision. I think probably industry and government have far more in common than we have differences, and I think by working together and holding events like this, or whether it's the previous events on economic substance to get everybody in the e-gaming sector up to speed on what's happening in the world out there, makes a huge difference, and everybody benefits.
Yeah, just to kind of round that off from a board perspective, I think that a lot of the time when we see initiatives presented to us, how they're often presented is like option A, B and C, and there's always a rationale for each one, and the team within digital might recommend a certain one, and that's the reasons that are clear. And it's always kind of bounced around, and sometimes we don't always go with that first option, it's actually rejected, and sometimes there's been, you probably won't mind me saying this, the team might be taken aback a bit, but actually once we talk about it and we actually have input from the specialists around the table who are operating in those industries, we might agree on option B, and it's actually, there's a clear rationale for that, and I think that's a great way of working, and it's actually not always just going forward. Just quickly going back to the data thing, I think that yes, it is great to have KPIs, we all need KPIs, but I think that, as has already been said, if we don't have the right data, how can we track the jobs? Treasury thinks that anyone that works in an insurance company is insurance, whether they work in IT, HR or anything like that. So it is quite difficult for the teams within DFE to actually get that data to actually work with in the first place.
Yeah. Right, I think we've got time for one question that's coming on Slido, and then that's pretty much ours, and it's a good one. So there's been a mention of KPIs in government. Digital operate as a business, but not sure this ethos exists across other government departments. Do you think KPIs across all of government would help alignment between government and the private sector?
Yes.
So it's a yes all round, yeah. Okay, are there any other questions from the floor before we close off? No? All good? All right, well thank you very much. Thank you very much for coming to this session. Thank you very much to our panellists. And we've got cyber security up next, talking about the most common blind spots for businesses that can cause devastating impacts. Thank you.